Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, can at times contain adult language and themes. It is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Digital Dissection podcast, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties, creators, and topics. We are your humble hosts, Joe and Mark, two pop culture nerds dedicated to telling entertainment history before it's forgotten too soon. Join us on Facebook, Twitter, and our blog for more information on the show. We also love to hear from you. Write us at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to dissecting.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, where it's that lovely time of the season where every once in a while, Mark lets me talk about anime. And this time, I've brought another friend. So joining us this time, my first college roommate, known by many names, but we're going to call him Josh. Josh actually never asked you if you're okay with going with your last name on here.
Oh gosh, I know that's pretty tough.
It's a lot. He does share a last name with one of the greatest investigative journalists of all time, who talked to the Marshall Division Ghostbusters.
Now that's a deep reference. That's a very very deep reference that we barely even know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Josh, aka Hey You in the Bushes, how are you doing tonight, man? Welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm doing pretty adequate, and thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, I think is what I'm supposed to say.
Well, I mean, we are happy to have you, and honor or punishment, either way, you're on board. And actually, quick side note: do you still have the snail child? Is that hanging around still, or is it lost to the ages?
Nope, it is safely protected. Actually, I took out a movie poster from a hardened storage cylinder.
Yeah,
and it's in there. It's not up yet, but we don't have a finished basement. So what do you?
That's okay. I'm just glad she's still safe.
Which years later?
What anime is that from? I forget where the snail child came from.
I don't know. It was it was one of those super early morning things, and we wanted colorful lights and something as we were super tuckered out.
Yes.
See, now this is a disclaimer warning for those of you listening at home, as we're usually assuming you are. There's a lot of inside jokes that are most likely going to happen between Joe and Josh tonight, so just be prepared. Maybe we'll try to release like a show notes thing that references all of the references and see how far we can get.
And all you gotta do is subscribe to that next tier on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
You guys can use that soundbite sometime if you want.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh yeah, we're stealing that. That's happening.
Yeah.
And in case I do find the snail child and where it came from, it will be in the show notes. Or if it's not there, you'll know I never found it.
Well, one thing we did find, which was a film that came out almost as long ago that I was born, which is why we're here today.
34 years ago. 34. It's been some time.
Lost a lot of hair over that time. Yeah.
Well, speaking of this show, of this really show, it's a movie, but it's now maybe a little spoiled. But I'm going to ask you, gents, what do Stranger Things, Kanye West, Looper, and the clothing brand Supreme all have in common?
The ability to cause a stroke by all being involved in the same sentence.
Yes.
The same font as the movie.
Absolutely. And what movie is that?
Akira.
Yeah.
Akira.
Akira Integra. GSR, front wheel drive.
Every one of those properties has admitted in some way, shape, or form that they've taken inspiration or pretty much straight up did like homages or copies to Akira. And including one that wasn't in there was South Park. They did an Akira reference. If you remember the Trapper Keeper episode, Cartman ends up very much like Tetsuo at the end of Akira. So
now we've truly done 2 spoiler alerts within the first 3 minutes here.
Although we didn't tell you. I mean, I guess if you've seen that episode of South Park and you've never seen Akira, like, some weird shit's gonna happen eventually. But then again, it's an anime that is kind of not really a spoiler. Weird shit's gonna happen eventually. There will always be some
Yeah.
cultural disconnect. And you know what?
Yeah.
Just strap on. Be on board for the ride. It's gonna be
Yeah.
weird. It's gonna
Yeah,
be fun.
everybody, get your strap-ons and get ready. We're going for a deep dive on Akira.
2 minutes, guys. 2 minutes.
Yeah, Josh is you can't see this, but he's starting his stretches, his male Kegels right now. He's getting ready.
Yes. All
Yeah.
right.
If you want to see the full video, check my Instagram. Use that soundbite if you want as well.
Mhm.
I'm gonna do it all
Now,
night.
while we are known for like going back to the early 2000s, the 90s, and nay, sometimes all the way back to the 80s, when we look at Akira, it's basically influencing a ton of modern day things, more than just, a podcast that at least 3 people are listening to at this point. So, what we want to do tonight is kind of go into what really makes this movie so influential and so, like, I don't know, like, lasting. What makes Akira so great that you have so many people willing to copy it, homage it, or at least keep referencing it about nearly 3.5 decades later?
And that I think is really the big point because, as you know, my anime journey. Well, there is no anime journey. We'll put it that
Very
way.
little.
That is a 404 not found footage type of thing for me.
Mhm.
I knew plenty of anime people. I had been around them. I've watched them, I've observed them, and I've seen them, eat and live very fulfilling lives. But I have very little knowledge about these things, and I chose to watch it after we brought this up. But after having watched it, now I am seeing just how much this touches of pop culture and yeah,
Mhm.
truly how many people have, I wouldn't say ripped it off, but have, paid homage as the French like to say. So
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so like Mark, like he just kind of freely admitted, like he watched this after we basically told him that we were doing this episode. He my friend Josh and I basically told Mark this is happening. So while Mark said, it just happened, Josh, like what drew you to this movie, or what keeps you coming back to watch this movie?
Great question. I'll get to it in a second. I just want to say it's super cool, and I haven't actually thought of it in the perspective of somebody who's never seen any of that, and
Hmm.
then being able to reference back of the things they do know and have experienced, where they're like, "Oh, it came from that. It came from that. It came from that," because it was so
Hmm.
long ago.
Yeah.
So I'm a little jealous, actually, you got to see it that way. But I got into it. First time I saw it was a while ago, and I was too young, for sure. But they used to show something on, I think it was the Sci-Fi Channel on Saturday mornings, and I've often-ish been a morning person, except for this weird period of time around college. But I remember always getting up early and like making sure that I'm going to watch it. And this was one of the movies that was on there because it was always this like really weird 2 hour block. And I think, let's see, it was going to be, I don't remember which the first was, but it was going to be Akira or Tokyo Tank Police, Iria the Zerum Project, probably another one that's right around in that range. And they were all kind of that same older, probably cheap licensing or something.
Hmm.
But this one I remember like solely for the reason why everybody does. It's that like sideways sliding motorcycle stop.
Yeah.
That, what's his
Hmm.
name? They said it like 1,000 times.
Kaneda.
Uh, yeah, thank you. Oh,
Hmm.
Canada. That he makes that everybody knows it from, and like
Oh yeah.
that image been stuck around forever. I mean, it's just
Oh
it's beyond iconic.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, the
absolutely.
only
Like everything's used it. Every like honestly, any almost you watch anything with a motorcycle, if you think of like a slide that was done, Akira did that slide and they did it first.
Yeah,
And not to be like, oh, well, it was I knew about it when it was before it was cool because I saw it on an anime. But no, basically, yeah, that's what it was. Is it did it. And like Josh said, it's become beyond iconic with the amount of things that like copy it or reference it now.
the only thing that would make that power slide cooler is if it had like an eagle superimposed on it with its like mouth wide open watching it in awe. Uh,
if you want to get into the
Mhm.
American references in that movie, I'm ready to jump ahead of the script.
They are a
Um,
ton, absolutely.
it's so
Um,
bad. Oh,
So, looking at this movie, then, I guess I guess we go a little into it with me with it. Like, I was just in it because like I had like just barely started getting into anime, and I think it was um high school. I think the first time I ever saw this was on like VHS, and it was like kind of grainy, but kind of great at the same time.
oh yeah.
Where I got it from a friend who I don't know how he got it because I don't think his parents would ever let him purchase this movie if they knew it was actually on it. Considering you saw, I think, anime titties within the first like 15 minutes of this movie.
It's
So
art. It's art.
it is art.
Okay. It's an art
Yeah.
form.
And as
And
much as
definitely
I
not the worst part of the art form. Oh God.
no, and as slanderous as they made that sound, this really like I would consider of I would say that this is art because of just how well and incredible it's done. Um, Watched it there, and I was weirded out by it at first because you see like some of the characters, and like within very early in the film, they're like these tiny weird little blue people. And you're like, what the fuck just happened? Like
With
everything was
their
making
mouths are
sense
always
until
open.
now. Yeah,
And they're
They're
so
always a
gross.
gape,
Yeah.
always a
Yeah.
gape. So like I didn't honestly did not appreciate the first time I saw it. I was a little weirded out by it. And then watched it again after I'd gotten through college and I was living on my own in Stevens Point. And then it actually took actually the second time I watched it, it actually took better. Like I remember I think going to watch the movie being like, I wonder if this is actually as bad as I remember, or not bad, but if this is as weird as I remember it being, because I always remember like people telling me like, oh, if you watch anime, you have to watch this movie. And typically that makes me never watch the thing I was just told to watch.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
I
You're
actually
such a
gave this best I
rebel.
could try. Oh, if anyone knows me, they know I'm
Just
a
so
rebel.
rebellious. Like, no, I won't.
Rebellious.
Yeah.
Not doing it. That's why I'm going to keep the same schedule my entire life by being a teacher because I never want to leave this asinine schedule. All right. So
Yeah.
let's now start looking into the actual work that went behind making this movie. So when we look at kind of like the overarching themes that are here, let's actually go into its production, where we look at Katsuhiro Otomo. I think Katsuhiro Otomo is the creator of Akira, and when he was looking at actually making this, actually, let's take a step back. Before he was thinking about making it, he was influenced greatly by actually like Western movies that were basically like Bonnie and Clyde and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, where like basically the idea is where I live is boring and I need to leave. So he got the idea to leave his smaller town and go into Tokyo, where he fell in love with the landscape and how like you could go from seeing modern architecture and then seeing a weird Spanish architecture building and then seeing something completely different all within like 3 or 4 blocks of each other. So that played a huge part into it. But if I were to say the word Tetsujin 28, is anyone familiar with that?
Being completely honest, it means almost nothing to me other than the recognition of the numbers 2 and 8. I know those.
I do know that it's about a boy,
It's true.
and there's something with a giant weapon. I do remember that.
It's true. That's right. So, and
Joe told me.
actually, American, I can guarantee you that eventually you will have heard of this. But basically, it was a manga ran in the 1950s. Basically, about a little boy who finds this giant secret weapon that was meant to be used in World War II against the Allies. But because the war ended before it was completed, it never made it out there. But he finds it. It turns on, shenanigans ensue. And when you had Otomo thinking about making Akira, he was approached in 1982. He was working for a magazine called Young Magazine, and he'd written a bunch of like smaller series manga before this. And he was approached with like, could you write something? We like you're really good. We'd like you to write something longer. So he started thinking of stories he could make, and this was started off as the inspiration for Akira was this Tetsujin 28. And by the end of it, the only thing that really survived was the number 28, which does anyone know where 28 was used in this movie?
Yeah, that was Tetsuo's patient number or child number, I bet.
Not quite. If you
That's
remember,
right. I knew they had numbers on
he
their
did.
hands.
That's close. That's actually close because all of the Esper children had numbers tattooed on their hands.
Oh, yeah.
And when you first actually see anything resembling Akira, it's his like containment tank, and the number is 28 that's on top of it.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, so close.
So close. And then, of course, the rebellious youth who found Tetsujin 28, none other than a boy named Kaneda. So those are really the
Oh,
only two
Canada.
things that ended up surviving. Oh, Canada, you're so great. We're keeping you around.
Interesting.
But before he wrote Akira, he did write a very well-received manga that was called
Gundam
Domu.
Wing.
Oh, Gundam Wing. I wish I could have had you for the Gundam Wing episode.
I would have just talked about Endless Waltz the whole time.
Which fantastic movie. Flippin' love Endless Waltz. Which maybe we'll revisit in season 3 because I only get so many anime episodes a season.
Some of those wounds, they might heal over, but you always know they're there.
They're there. Absolutely.
And no, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
We know that 3 beats of War, Peace, and Revolution will go on through all of history, Mark, and you cannot stop this from happening.
Dude, I don't want to be challenged by the things I'm watching, okay? I don't want to learn while watching a movie. I just want explosions and nudity and possibly drug use on top of the nudity. Like I'm a very simple person, okay?
Okay, well then Akira is actually perfect for you.
Core values here. Very core, wholesome values here.
Yeah, that's all we need. All we need. But anyway, Otomo had written and actually illustrated the work for Domu and several other shorter serials before this. And Domu was about a little girl with psychic powers, who first is introduced in her story. Her name is Etsuko, and she basically sees like a kid being thrown off an apartment building and then uses her psychic powers to not have the child die. And her story ensues from there. It was very popular. It won the 1981 Japanese Cartoonist Association Award for Best Comic or Best Manga. It also was the first manga to ever win the Nihon Science Fiction Taisho Award. So, very, very solid. And eventually, Dark Horse would actually bring that over in 2001. It was one of its best sellers that year. So
I'm still stuck on the Domu thing, and my first thought that it was a Pokemon from one of the newer games, and I just wasn't familiar with it. That was the image that popped in my head.
There is like an 85% chance that's still true. Because they're like, what, 700 Pokemon now? 9,000? Somewhere between those two numbers?
I bet it's thousands. We'll talk about it on another episode, guys. Go ahead and look through our feed, check our playlist, see if you can find it.
Yep. Smash that like button, hit subscribe while you're at it.
Wait, so
he's getting it now.
Now you're saying you're not saying Domo, you're saying Doumo, right?
Yes, Doumo. I'm sorry.
Because Domo is that furry little dude with the big chompers and all that.
Yeah, so the angry brownie.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here like going, what in tarnation are you talking about? Because I'm like,
what in the Sam Hale?
Yeah, it's Doumo, not Domo.
Yes,
right?
Doumo. Yes.
Okay, all right. Because I still don't know what that means, but now I'm closer.
I keep hearing the moo, and maybe it's because I'm from Wisconsin.
Well, technically,
all 3 of us proud of Wisconsin.
Yeah, technically, 100% of this call is brought to you by the state of Wisconsin.
The state of Wisconsin,
America's Dairyland.
We're sorry. Tell your folks I said hi. That's for that one comedian. Go to his shows. He's a co-sponsor.
Yeah, he's not, but we wish he was. Thank you, Charlie, for listening. You're not, but thank you if you are. So this is where Otomo starts now writing Akira. And have either of you ever read the manga by any chance?
No, definitely just the movie snob for it.
Ah, gotcha. Well, fun fact about the manga, it was the first manga fully translated in its entirety in the United States. So it was the first one from start to end, which they started writing it in 1982. Guess what year they finished it?
There's only so many years, I guess. So
many years. So many.
1999.
1999? Mark?
You're talking the actual run of the manga itself?
The actual run of the manga, 120 chapters. Keep in mind, the movie came out in 1988.
I was going to say, I was going to try and go for like Price is Right style and go 1986. But that probably wouldn't be right.
Hurry, I almost got it pulled up.
No. Oh, and the answer is 1990. Still
Most
2
of the
years after
numbers
the movie
right.
came out.
Got
You
some
were
points.
you were close, but Josh, if we do go off of Price is Right rules, you did overbid.
You heard wrong, but that's all right.
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
Yes, I mean that's fair. I mean, this is all worth fake internet points anyway.
There
Yeah,
we
now
go.
I feel
There
like
we
we do
go.
need to explain to people that manga translates to photos that tell a story, right? Is
Mhm.
that what that means? I'm just kidding.
I mean,
It's just
it
a
could.
It
basic.
felt good.
Yeah, it felt
I
right.
mean, you had me as a believer.
Okay. Well, I mean, but manga is basically just like, comics of the Japanese world, right? Like they're
Mhm.
sometimes they're even posted in like newspapers, aren't they? Like it's almost like
Yeah.
a Sunday newspaper comic strip, right?
Yeah, I mean, their newspapers, other like magazines and publications typically have some sort of manga running in them.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
sorry. I'm like full on ignorant traveler right now. Like this is such a blind spot for me. You could haymaker me and I would not see it coming. So this is
I feel like you're bragging about having a more productive youth than me and Joe.
I'm totally not. Totally not. Yeah. It was all fueled
I
by
don't find it
ecto-cooler and the
hurtful. I'm just glad
Psychogenesis.
that you did. You know,
Yeah. It's okay. I've got plenty of childhood trauma that filled that space. Don't you worry.
Oh,
Hey,
yes. So as the
if
year
you want
goes
to talk
on,
more about mental health issues, come to my channel. And every Tuesday, I got nothing on that one. Sorry, guys.
no,
Keep going.
do you even have a YouTube channel?
I mean,
No, I mean, I was just
he's just
curious.
plugging
Actually,
it to
hold
plug
on.
it and then inspire confusion, right? Like let
I was
me
going to
keep
throw
plugging it.
something out there and just be like, yeah, come to this channel, just in case in the future I do and someone's like
Mhm.
back watching episodes or something. Sad but okay. That's a blog that I started. Don't look for
There
it.
we go.
It's not published yet. SAHD and then but okay. One T, no buts. The whole thing. Look for it. Hashtags and stuff.
And we're gonna make you remember that at the end when we give you like the opportunity
Oh
to
no,
tell
it's
us where to
real.
find you on
Like
the
it's
internet.
it's
It's
there.
there?
Yeah. I'll tell you all about it when we're offline or whatever it's called, off script.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, anyway, so Otsuo is working on Akira for a few years, and he eventually gets approached to actually start working on animation. So he gets a job working on a project called Genma, which is another very famous manga. I have to say, I have not read it, and I also have not seen the subsequent movie based off of it. But while he's working on Genma, he actually kind of starts privately just animating Akira as he's going along. So just in his spare time, because animation, I'm guessing, super easy to create. There's no way that takes a long time, not an overbearing process, that someone has time to animate something on the side while he's also working on a professional thing. And granted, he was working as he was the lead character designer for Genma, so I'm not sure how much of actual animating he did during that movie.
I was gonna say this area of the world at this point in time, like if we're gonna go into like historical perspectives, some of the biggest animation studios did exist in either Japan or
Mhm.
the Philippines, and so I mean, obviously, or I say honestly, not obviously, but honestly, the idea of animation as a hobby doesn't seem that far off, right?
Yeah.
But
And actually, there's a good chance that a lot of your favorite American cartoons were animated in Japan or the Philippines and brought
yes,
over. Yep. Hmm.
totally, and yeah,
Yes.
declining
Yeah.
levels of quality depending on what series, but yes.
Yes. Well, the demand and the demand was high and the time was low, so you kind of get what you get in that scenario. But yeah, that's what typically would happen. But anyway, while he's doing this privately, one of his publishers at Young ends up finding out that he's doing this, and he looks at it and he's like, "Why don't we turn this into something? This is incredible. Like Akira is basically as a manga, it's a success. Like it's doing very well, and." He's like, "This would be perfect as a movie." So Atsumo is like, actually, like, he's not like, "Oh no, I'm just doing this for fun. No, 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 please don't make this into anything." He's like, "No, let's fucking do this. Let's turn this into a GD movie."
You son of a bitch, I'm in.
So now that he is on board for making this into a movie, he actually had production notes ahead of time. Unlike some writers, how he wanted the story to actually end, so that when, a movie or perhaps a TV series is made based off of his work and he would be involved in it, that he wouldn't have to hand it off to other writers to suddenly come up with the end of the story and completely blow an 8th season on.
Simpsons.
Yep, definitely The Simpsons. Fuck the whole thing up. So he basically, in his mind, knew where he wanted the story to end up, but also at the same time, he did say he did not want the anime to just be like a carbon copy of what was going on in the story. He instead said that this needed to be a visual piece and not a hero piece. So when we say like a hero piece, what do we have in mind, gents?
Marvel, DC, Marvel, DC crossovers, DC Marvel crossovers,
DC Marvel crossover reboot.
Reboots, yeah. I forgot the reboots. I know there's another.
Reboots galore.
I was only going to throw out Hero Hamada, but Big Hero 6 hadn't come out yet, so I got nothing.
Not there. But basically, like, when we think hero pieces, these are movies where you have like one shining character who comes in and saves the day. They typically have some sort of either moral high ground, or they learn to take a moral high ground throughout the story. And since we've watched Akira, can we say, is there a hero in this story?
Absolutely, but we'll bring that debate up to the end. We'll see what time card.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to that when we get to the characters in this story. After we
I'll
get
give
to
you a hint,
the making of.
Everybody, he is a soldier.
Okay. All right, I know who you're going for. But so our creator here, Katsuhiro, is basically saying, nope, no hero piece. Instead, I want this to be a visual piece. So he wanted to actually like basically employ a lot of things that hadn't been used very much, but actually created a pretty high quality piece of work. One of those is he pre-scored this entire movie. If you're not familiar with how usually anime is made, typically all the drawing and all the animation is done first, and then they do the voice work and they score it afterwards. He's like, no. We're doing all of it before. And that had never been done before in Japan, which may not seem terribly big if you're like a Disney fan, because most of the Disney stuff is pre-scored, which is why things line up with their mouths very well. And that was actually how this started. He's like, we should at least pre-score close-ups, because I actually want things to look like they're actually saying it. So he pre-scored everything. He also used computer-generated effects, which was not done terribly much in the 80s. Even though not a ton of the movie used a lot of computer-generated effects. Can we recall many moments from this that used it?
Just upon my one and only viewing of this movie.
The one viewing.
Yeah, just the one. I feel like anything that involved like the high speed chases or the high speed, motorcycle riding, some of those shots where there's a lot of action, I'm assuming that stuff had to have been at least used on a computer, in some of the larger explosions and trippy, effects that kind of happen, right? Like, I don't know if I'm on the right track or not, but that was my thought, at least.
Nothing up there, Josh?
All I know is, like, when it comes to drawing cartoons, animation, or anything else in the past, the only thing I can ever envision is somebody who draws that frame and then folds it over and then draws that next frame. And I always imagine somebody drawing 20,000 pictures a day just to give me that flip book effect. When you got little stick man jumping or whatever. I can't help myself. That's all I can think of. And I feel so much pity and thankfulness for those people.
Yeah,
which
believe it or not,
as a computer, it's just click,
point and click, baby. Yeah, believe it or not, none of those were computer generated. All that shit was drawn.
Damn.
I know, insane. Really, if you can recall a doctor ever basically having this weird little sphere in front of him, and these basically, when reading psychic auras, it'd have like these weird waves come off of it. That was the computer generation that was mostly used for this. But that little bit,
not where I thought you were going with Doctor with a Stick. So I'm really glad we did the animation.
Yeah. considering all the experimentation done on children in this film, that is very refreshing to know.
Lots there. So that was there, but probably one of the most like groundbreaking things that was used for this was a quick action recorder. Is anyone familiar with a quick action recorder for animation?
It's
like none of you watched cartoons growing up.
I just envision like Kenny G with like a recorder on the side while the guy's like animating, and
yep, it's purely inspiration.
just quick action with the recorder moving back and forth, swaying the curly hair in the air. Yeah, sorry.
Just swaying, and the animator's looking like, oh, this is brilliant. I can work so much faster with this.
Yeah. Ooh. Suddenly the work desk is just on fire. It's just yes. No, I got nothing.
Yeah. So basically, what it is, it allows camera shots of the individual frames that are drawn, and basically you take a picture of it, draw another frame, take a picture, etc., and then it'll actually play those back in sequence at 24 frames per second. And that doesn't seem really great, but what is great about it is that the animators can now spot mistakes in individual frames before they actually start adding it into the cells for the background. So it allows them to basically proofread all of their drawings before they turn it into their teacher. Pretty solid.
Great reference. That's good.
Yeah. So this was really helpful though for like those the heavy animation pieces that you were talking about that came off as visually amazing. And part of the reason that they're able to do that at such high quality is because of the fast action recorder, where they could catch mistakes they had made. And they said, especially like transitioning shots, and especially in facial expressions, it was insanely useful. Akira comes out in 1988. I fucking love Exo Squad. Love me some Exo Squad. You get me into robots, and I'm just in. I'm sold on that. But so Akira comes out in 88 and is pretty much a smash in Japan. And they even had this idea, like when they were making it, like, we want to market this internationally. So let's now go international. Let's come home to America. And when you look at anime in America thus far until 1988, you've got things coming out. It's like, again, like Tetsujin 28, Mazinger Z, King Beast Go Lion, and Science Ninja Team Gotcha Man.
All of them sound like I should know them.
Well, perhaps you heard of Gigantor. Because that's what Tetsujin 28 was marketed as in the United States. King Beast
Gigantor.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's
I got you. Okay.
That's the story that where Akira was supposed to be based off of originally, but he only used 28 in Kaneda. King of the Beast Go Lion. You maybe have heard of a little thing called Voltron, Defender of the Universe.
Before we get away from Gigantor, I just want to mention that
I'm not singing it again.
No. Gigantor, the only reason why it's familiar to me is because of the Night at the Museum movies. Owen Wilson's character calls Ben Stiller Gigantor.
Yep.
Several times. And I'm like, I always thought, like, is this an original thing? Like someone,
No.
That's a real word. I know it's been used.
Didn't Crowley call Sam Gigantor a few times in Supernatural?
I think he might have, yeah.
I mean, I know you called him Moose plenty of times. But yeah, okay, sorry. I just like Gigantor. I was like, oh my god, I know that.
You've heard of it, even if that's the thing. Like, even if you haven't actually watched Gigantor, like you've heard the name.
I totally have.
So yeah, you've got that Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, also known as Battle of the Planets, and this is basically what we have in the United States. Is we would basically pay out to Japanese companies like Toei and Toho and Sunrise, and we would buy like 4 of their shows, and like, all right, we're gonna freaking like snip them up, stitch them together, and make one show out of them for cheap because we're not having to pay animators to make something brand new. And we would get basically these weird censored glimpses into Japanese animation, and to varying degrees of success. Obviously, Voltron worked, whereas Gigantor didn't work very great. I forgot what Mazinger Z was brought here as. Also flopped. And Battle of the Planets didn't do so hot. So out of like those 4, Voltron worked. But we don't get a whole much. It's basically serialized things. We have this idea that anime in Japan is what cartoons are here for kids. They're for kids. And then Akira happens. Yep.
But, well, okay. So one thing I did do some research on, because from the anime that I have seen, most of it is fairly recent or,
Mm-hmm.
backed by Netflix or something, right?
Yep.
And so when I watched this and I looked at it and it says 1988, I went, how the hell was this possible in 1988 to have this
Mm-hmm.
kind of quality? Because right away, it's like pretty visually stunning movie. And so then I kind of pulled the thread a little and found out that there was $5.5 million poured into this production
Mm-hmm.
back in 1988.
Yep.
And now, Josh, I don't know how much of the program you've listened to historically, but Joe and I love to adjust for inflation, okay? Now,
We love our math.
the buying power for this movie, okay, so 5.5 million in 1988 is the equivalent of $13,366,627.22. So
Boom.
the money was there. I think that is
Yes.
why this looks so critically different from everything else I've
Mm-hmm.
seen from the same era.
Yeah.
Just putting that out there.
Young definitely doubled down in this production. And when it hit the States, as long as as well as a lot of other places around the world, it's like nothing they had seen before. Because again, we'd gone from this idea that cartoons were made for kids, and here was something beautifully animated with a lot of adult content and a lot of adult weight to it, and took the planet by storm. This thing made $80 million on that budget of 15. Was it 13 or 15 million? I have a bad memory, and you just said it.
$5.5 million.
5.5 million. 5.5 million made 80.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, not bad. So that's where I'm gonna go with all of the background on this movie. Like, this is how the movie happened. This is why the movie looks so great, is because of, like, again, investing money into the technology to have such a high quality product. And then again, also just a very, I mean, for as little of experience as he had going into it, still a pretty acclaimed writer and animator or drawer or illustrator. So we had, like, basically, it was the right night. All the players were there, and it just worked. And I don't know why this is the accent I'm going with right now. It makes no real good movie reference.
If you do it again, we're
All right.
leaving.
Okay, that's fair. But
I
now,
really, as soon as you started that, I was just about to make a comment about
Mhm.
He's just a tracer, to give old Kevin Smith a little bit of credit, but then you started
Mhm.
it on that, and it just went out the window.
Yep. For those of you who've shut off the episode, I don't blame you.
Yeah. Well, okay, so question
You
I
cut
have.
that paste it a little bit earlier, or
Yeah. Yeah, we'll reuse that in the beginning, and just like good storytelling, you'll hear it at the beginning and then we'll come back to it later. Uh,
Mhm.
but okay, so the question I had for this,
Mhm.
I figured there had to be some manga influence, but was the movie like directly adapted from the manga, or was there quite a bit of changes? Like, because when I think about stuff like the Resident
Mhm.
Evil movies or obviously a lot of video game adaptations, they tend not to follow, like beat for beat what the games would do.
Mhm.
So I guess in adapting, essentially what's a comic, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, like how close was it? Do we know? I mean,
I mean, I think Josh, you've already admitted to not reading the manga, and I haven't read the manga, so I'm going solely off of what Katsuhiro said, and
hmm,
saying that again, his goal was not to basically just turn the manga into a movie. Obviously, like, the characters, like, a lot of the characters are the same. I'm guessing the same central idea is there, but at the same time, when making the movie, he hadn't finished writing the manga yet.
hmm.
So when he started writing the movie, he started writing it from the end and worked backwards.
So Game of Thrones style, but no one was thinking that he would die of hypertension before he got there.
Yes, absolutely. And
Okay.
again, what actually also helped is that
there's one for our boy here, everybody.
and when you look at Katsuhiro, like, he kept production notes even for the manga and for the movie. And in his production notes, when he started making the manga, by the time he was done writing the first chapter, he knew roughly where he wanted the story to end up. So he had an idea of what he wanted it to be, even though he hadn't quite gotten there yet.
Because he basically wanted Kaneda and Tatsuo to meet in Paris and seeing each other, right across from each other at a
Mhm.
table, and
Yep,
and
and
then
then
and then just smile, and then it fades to black, right?
yes, and that's when Tetsuo would look at Kaneda and say, "Wait a second. that man's rich. I'm not going to pay my bill. And that's why he nodded and just got up and walked off.
We might
That's
have
right.
confused this for the Dark Knight again, which we've done
Maybe.
before.
We do that a lot. And for some of you,
That
may
is
be
how it ended,
confused.
right? We watched the right movie.
Yeah. And we may have brought up a name confusing some of us because we've said Tetsuo a few times right now, and we haven't really talked about the characters in this movie.
We have
haven't
not
even,
character dived. No.
no, we haven't even really talked about like the overall plot or like backdrop to this movie. We've just talked about the production stuff.
Yeah, that
So
might
let's
be
talk
what
about the
people are
world of
interested
Akira
in.
first.
Yeah.
Maybe. Like
Yeah.
that we've dissected the pre-Akira and the acclaim to Akira, but now let's look at the actual movie. So
Yeah.
who remembers how this movie opens up?
Wow. For my first
Anyone?
viewing,
First thing, yeah. Where do we start?
I distinctly remember like a biker sequence where people are chasing after each other. There was like an explosion or something.
Yeah, hot and heavy right away, right?
Yeah, like you're dropped right in the action. It's like a helicopter, leaving in Vietnam basically to figure it out. I think that's where it began, but I don't know. Maybe you guys can remember me or remind me of this because only one time.
That's exactly how it went with Ben Stiller throwing up Armageddon, whatever movie that was, Doomsday, Babysitter's Club, something.
Well, if we take those two answers, we're actually pretty close because we start off actually in 1988, believe it or not. And you get this nice like cityscape of Tokyo, and as it zooms out to its fullest, suddenly, big old explosion.
That's right.
This is I want to say a reference to the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And for as much as Katsuhiro says he had inspiration from American films, this is one thing that resonates with Japanese culture. Will probably like resonate endlessly to my understanding or my opinion on it. Is that moment, which how couldn't it, like has shaken the country to its core, or it's going to like affect generations to come yet. And we see that we've seen it in so many of their other anime and manga. So it's the starting point to go with here. And they do mention that this is also how World War III starts. They don't really go into it, believe it or not, like in this movie afterwards. Like there's no like other thing. Like they mention the war one more time in this movie, but they just kind of say World War III happens after this. We don't know why. Like, did Japan start fighting other people? Did people like, no, Japan was my friend, so I'm going to start bombing people that we think hate Japan? We don't really elaborate on that at all. So instead, biker gangs.
Which
because
is the
now
perfect cover for a horrible thing that happened. And then now we've been friends for a long time. So like, let's just skip all that really bad stuff and just go into something super cool at the time, which is two wheels on a road.
Darn right.
Right. Smart.
Motorbikes, man. We lived that life once upon a time.
No, you don't choose a life, the life chooses you.
Darn right. So now we're in the distant future of 2019. And we're in Neo Tokyo because Tokyo is still a crater. Like there's not really much left. They actually rebuild something that goes there, but for the most part, they've relocated Tokyo into Neo Tokyo, and it's kind of Dread-like, to be honest. It's very Mega City 1-esque if you are familiar with that property, where things are overcrowded and the crime is almost as bad as New Jersey, and that's where we are in Neo Tokyo with our street gangs. And we quickly are introduced to like basically our two main characters who we follow, who Kaneda and Tetsuo.
Yeah, that's something I was wondering too. I don't know if I missed it, but did we ever get an explanation for why these gangs exist? I mean, is this just what kind of rises up out of the, out of the pandemonium of trying to rebuild cities? Like, I guess
what's a good apocalypse without a biker gang? Is I think the idea behind this.
That's the easy sell, but if I remember right, at some point there's a principal who's yelling at them and calling them degenerates or some other, stereotypical word. And that's all it is. It's just kids making bad decisions. We got to get out there and make the parks clean, give them some alternatives.
So really it's not that foreign a concept. It's okay. I got it.
Yeah, so on top of biker gangs, you also get some pretty sweet punk rock music playing in the background. Really tall buildings for a landscape with these bright neon lights all over the place, and definitely a red light district somewhere. So really, it kind of just boils down to being this cyberpunk heaven.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that from what I saw. It's it definitely the vibe was 80s, obviously,
Hmm.
right? Futuristic 80s, what the 80s thought future would look like.
They were wrong.
Yeah, a
Yeah,
little bit, because for some reason, even in 2019, pretty sure we were still using like dot matrix computers. Um,
yeah.
what are those printers that print really loudly and have like the easy tear side things? What are those again?
Apples.
Apples. Apple probably made it. Um, I'm losing it, but like again, in every 80s movie that took place in the distant future, they still had those fucking printers. That's what they had.
Yeah, one of the things that did surprise me out of this was Canada has a massive Canon
Mhm.
film sticker on his bike. It takes up like half of the front of it, and
Yeah.
I'm like, why is he having a sponsored bike? It's not like he's a NASCAR or something. It
Hmm.
just it threw me off. I was like, that's a big fucking sticker,
Yeah,
right?
which I guess we should talk about that bike because that's one of the more iconic things about this movie is that motorcycle. And if you ever see advertising for this movie, it's probably again another thing that gets copied quite a bit is this red motorcycle at the top of the poster, and you see like Kaneda walking in his big red leather like Michael Jackson puffy like leather jacket with a pill on the back, and then it
Yeah,
says Akira like underneath him. This is again like an iconic vehicle. It's used in Ready Player One,
yeah,
because
that's
one
right.
of the main characters uses that. She doesn't do the power slide though, which is kind of upsetting.
Super rude.
Terribly rude.
It depends because the bike does slide just before it hits King Kong, right?
It does.
So
But does
she's
she put a leg down?
yeah, I she might have
I
honestly
don't know.
because because she's already starting to get out of the way, and then she
Yeah.
gets grabbed by by the main character. So I don't know, but yes,
Hmm.
yes. So when they mentioned that reference in Ready Player One, I was just kind of like blank staring and blinking, going, "This means nothing to me,"
Yeah.
but it's a reference to something.
Hmm. Yeah. That was like
So
me
now
with
I
the
Got to
know.
be
Unruh
careful with
Banzai.
them.
Yeah,
So yeah, he does have this badass bike, which he does like Tetsuo is enthralled by the bike, so he wants to ride it, but kind of is like, nah, you can't handle my ride, man. Um,
Very
like
big
this bike is
brother.
too
Yeah,
much for you,
very
which
big brother.
very big brother, which is kind of honestly like the relationship that they seem to establish with these two through the movie. Is Kaneda definitely feels like he needs to. I mean, it's they've got like this. I think it's Bosozoku is what they refer to this in Japan. Is basically like rebel youth biker gang, is what this is, and Kaneda is kind of like the head of the gang.
yeah.
Very very fatherly, big brotherly to every young
Yes,
girl in
I
it.
was gonna say this
Hmm.
relationship feels less brotherly and more almost like stepdadish from a Hollywood standpoint. Like
Hmm.
you can clearly tell that one is influencing the other here, but it's not to the point that like a brother is proud of you but can't tell you he's proud of you.
Hmm.
Like for this, like the way that I kind of got it was like Kaneda is kind of tough on Tatsuo, but there's not like a lesson at the end.
Yeah.
He's just very tough on this guy, and he cares
Hmm.
about him, but yeah, it never quite gets to use these lessons for something,
Yeah,
right?
again, kind of like this is like not a hero piece. There is
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
this is why I've treated you all this way all this time, Tetsuo, so you could be strong yourself. There's none of that. It's just no, like you were
It's a
fucking
hero,
up.
but
I came to
again, we'll
help.
get into it later. It's a
Yeah,
surprise for later.
huge
yeah,
surprise for later. So we kick off then with our biker sequence, and of course there's a rival biker gang. Shenanigans ensue, and a weird blue man shows up.
uh,
And
y-
Tetsu ends up getting into an accident as we are gang warring, and a weird little blue guy's there.
yeah, and if you're
Takashi, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's his name, and only
Yep.
because it's such a like common character's name in
Yeah.
so many. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Takashi. And we don't get his name until what I'd say halfway through this movie. And as well as his significance, we don't get because again, me watching this the first time, like, the fuck's up with this blue kid? He looks so weird compared to everyone else in this movie. I have no idea what's going on. But if you're at that point watching this movie, stick with it. Blue kid's kind of important.
I was gonna say I never had a blue kid in any of my classes growing up,
No.
but I was like, you know what? I've already agreed to watch this. I'm gonna keep going with it. That's fine. You know, you get. I mean, now just to break down the elements of the early film here, like you're introduced to something that isn't that hard to visualize. I think we all kind of know what street gangs are.
Yep.
But then you do start to get a little bit of a thread that you don't know how to explain.
Mm-hmm.
Do I tug on this, or do I sit in with what's familiar? So
Yeah.
they definitely don't try to do too much too soon.
Mm-hmm. Not too much too soon, but what they do shortly after we get this biker gang and we get this accident and the weird blue kid shows up is eventually everyone gets caught and we can see that they're living in a pretty heavily policed city. Like
Yeah.
the police do not fuck around in this movie. It is like straight up violence, ask questions later sort of scenario. And we see they get arrested quickly. There are protests kind of all over the city protesting the government and basically what they're
Tax
spending money
reform.
on and the tax
Yeah.
reform. All the time tax reform. Everyone
Mhm.
promises lower taxes, no one gives them to us. Yep. So we've got protests,
Except
we've got
for-
police brutality.
And then you can fill that in later for whoever you want.
Yes, exactly. And they're probably Hitler.
If I can just take a side note on starting with that protest part, you know, there's so many different things where you can interpret everything through this movie. There's so many moving pieces, just lots.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say the one thing that they don't do over the top is really get into like some sort of weird political message, whether it's old stuff,
Yeah.
new stuff, future stuff, or anything. You know, it's
Mhm.
there and it's like, oh, this is kind of this problem, but it's not some like catalyst to all the issues going on or whatever. It's just
Mhm.
always that kind of simmering in the background thing that just really adds to like this new city and this new environment to kind of build it up.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not like I don't know. I'm trying to even like we'll get to like what we think is maybe the main message of Akira because as much as I like the movie, I struggle with what the main message is for it because it has so many small things and it doesn't overwhelm you with any of them. It's just as like nice, quick little hits, quick little messages, and then like they all just contribute to this greater story.
So this is coming from just one viewing, okay? But I
Mhm.
did struggle with the same thing. What I tried to whittle it down to was this is uh, basically building a world where there's individual, let's just call them like capsules, okay, that kind of
Mhm.
take place within this. So you do have, like you mentioned, police brutality, how they interact with the main characters. You also have, as Josh mentioned, you've got some political intrigue that's taking place at the same time as well.
Mhm.
It doesn't exactly have like a clearly defined. It's not like maybe the most important thing going on here. It's just something that influences some of the other things that affect the main characters too. So what I'm getting at here, and I don't want to ruin it for anybody, is that there are small things within this movie that all kind of make up this painting,
Mhm.
but not one of these truly takes over, the entire landscape. So I don't know. Like I felt like there's plenty of stuff you could focus on, but it does feel like it's contained for the most part until it has no choice but to intersect.
Mhm.
So, but yeah.
I think that's pretty much spot on. You've got a lot of themes through here. None of them like bogart the mic at any point in time. And you just see how these characters have to live in this complex and very diverse world that they're stuck in. So we get Tetsuo, who eventually wakes up after the issue with the motorcycles. He's all alone and he's kind of in this weird like facility sort of thing. Like literally like the FBI came and picked him up more or less as a person of interest. And meanwhile, Connie down the others were basically just forced like, hey, you got to go to school because you're kids. So we're not going to really punish you. We're going to say stop being a motorbike gang and you go
They
to school.
punished them. I don't know if you can remember the principal office scene. That one
Oh
was
God,
brutal. It was brutal.
they don't get punished necessarily by the police after, like, of course, the way they're arrested is pretty violent, but they're not thrown in jail. They're just like, and they
Yeah.
don't even take their motorcycles away. They just told like, no, fuckers, go to school.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
go to
then
school. We
everything's
called
fine.
your principal very, dare I say, like 50s Mayberry style. Like, we're gonna tell your mom on you, but these poor kids didn't have moms. Like,
Mhm.
we'll call the authority figure in your life.
Yeah, pretty
That
much.
that was a major part of it that I was actually kind of confused by is
Mhm.
the complete lack of influence by parents on these kids. Like
Mhm.
it you see so many of these films try to explain behavior, right? Like because for a young like we're not going to call this like a youth film by any means. Like this isn't a coming of age tale necessarily. I'm not going to use that
Mhm.
here. But normally you at least try to understand why characters are the way they are. And a lot of times parents are the explanation for that because, well, I own two children. I know how much of an influence I have on them. But they don't do that here. Like there's not really a major investment in
Mhm.
any of that storytelling. And so it was a little weird, you know?
Very. Yeah, you don't there is no home life for any of, like, again, this is a very young cast that you have in this. Like, these kids are in their early teens. We're assuming they're at least 15, 16, and can be legally driving their motorbikes, but we don't
Yeah.
know. They're a troubled youth.
When did they trade the 64 crayon container with the sharpener in the back for a 200 mile per hour killing machine?
Yeah.
Like, that's what I was trying to understand. Like, I get there's biker gangs and all that, but it's like, when
Mhm.
did that handoff occur? You know? How did they just end up like this?
Yeah, we don't know, but then again, like from understanding of a lot of Japanese like anime films and storytelling, that's not their main concern. They don't really care about continuity. It's not a thing for them. It's another part of the story they're focusing on. So we don't know why the parents aren't around. We get throughout this entire movie no real mention of the parents for any of these youths. But we now have our two main characters divided, and this is where their stories really start to, I mean, very much diverge because Kaneda is basically chasing a girl for most of
Yeah.
his time, and we see a lot of his motivation is just to either keep his biker gang together, defend his turf against the rival gang, and get this girl to like him. But
Yeah.
Tetsuo has a much darker thing going on at this time. Who remembers what Tetsuo's going through?
Puberty. I mean, it is brutal. It is just,
Hmm.
it's exploding. It's crazy.
Yeah, and
Poor boy got experimented on.
hmm got experimented on, and this is basically think X-Men, but really, really bad and also kind of more likely. Where he basically he starts developing like headaches and hallucinations and very quickly like telepathic powers.
I think they said psychic a lot when they
Yeah, they use
interpreted
psychic.
or
Hmm.
translated it. Because
Telekinetic, I
I
think,
watched, yeah, I watched the
That's
dubbed
the one.
version.
Yep, it's
Yeah,
telekinetic because telepathic is Professor X,
yeah.
telekinetic is Jean Grey, and he's more Jean
Yes.
Grey than he's Professor X.
Yeah.
At first,
At first.
At first, yep. So he starts developing telekinetic powers, and we start seeing that while Kaneda had this idea that he was helping Tetsuo all this time, Tetsuo does not feel the same way. He basically sees Kaneda bailing him out or helping him as a way of for Kaneda to like puff himself up and say he's better than Tetsuo, and that's why Tetsuo has to always be saved. So you have this action interpreted completely different by your two main characters of this movie. And that then defines who they are for the rest of the movie. Because the rest of it, Kaneda consistently tries helping Tetsuo, despite the fact that Tetsuo does not want the help throughout this movie. But
Yeah.
when you look at Kaneda trying to help him, he's kind of like, Tetsuo, you idiot. I'm trying to help you. Do what I tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like the tiger is showing its teeth the entire time, but instead you're just trying to keep pissing it off with like, dad values. It was very bizarre to see that. It's like this dude is increasingly getting more untethered from who he was at the beginning. And for some reason, our main character just kind of just does not seem to understand you're not helping at all. I he doesn't seem to learn that lesson even towards the end of the movie.
I don't think he learned a lot of lessons in it, but no, you're right. It's almost like I'm going to shock you into doing what I say so I can be controlling or helping you or whatever, interpretation you want. But instead it's like, I'm going to keep shocking you, bud, over and over and over. I'm going to jostle you out of that train of thought and everything. I'll just go back to normal and we'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And as the movie goes on, we find out it is very much not fine. We don't want to spoil too much of this for you because again, it's an iconic movie. We want you to go and watch it.
I do want to mention one of these plot threads that once again doesn't necessarily overtake everything, but it is part of what is kind of going on underneath this. Because there is like this underground like pseudo rebellion that is going on as well. And that's where Kaneda meets, this potential love interest that you mentioned earlier. He's kind of falling around. And so
it's K.
Yep.
Yes.
Although we don't get her name for a while because Connie was trying to get her name for a good, probably 40 minutes of this movie.
I think her buddy, Ryu, he might have said it way in the beginning when they were shouting something up, but it was so doesn't matter because of the other 50 things going on.
Yeah.
I
just I tried to remember it the whole time.
It is an easy detail to kind of get lost in because I agree with you. The first time I watched it, I was like, well, what are they really rallying against? Did they just not like corruption in politics? Because guess what? You can do that at any time in any country, no matter what class you are. It's like you can always find something wrong with politics. So for me, that was one thing where I'm like, okay, this is here. Okay. But it's just kind of noise at that point. So it doesn't necessarily help us lead into this conflict, Joe, that you mentioned near the end, but it's there. It's there. Just know it's coming. You'll see it.
It does, however, lead to kind of an in-between spot where we see that not only is there this kind of this underground political unrest happening and protesting, but also there's a legitimate, actual weird underground to Neo Tokyo. And that's where we've got some weird government experiments going on, including on psychic children.
And that's a perfect segue to the absolute hero, just to call you wrong, Joe, the absolute hero of this movie, which is Colonel Shikishima. Because if there's anybody throughout the whole movie that stays true to his values, is trying to help out the world, help everybody out, including the kids, it's the Colonel, man. I mean, he, as he said 10,000 times in the movie, he is a soldier.
Well, you're dead on, man. Like when I was watching that's the only person in this movie where I kind of found myself doing the 80s fist pump at the end of the film kind of thing. I watched him and I'm like, he does legitimately care for these kids that are in this experimentation program, which I didn't see coming because at first I was like, he's there, he's like a facilitator and he's fighting against this government, right? That's trying to tell him how to spend his money because we've given you all this money to try to figure out these psychic powers and you're not getting us to where we need to go. And to see him consistently be like, yes, I have things that I have to get, the results that people want, but I'm still worried about the kids. It was a very complex and kind of hard thing to interpret at first because I didn't quite know if he was actually speaking the truth or if he was just saying that so that he didn't lose control of the whole scenario.
And I think that's the beauty of the character, really, is because when you're introduced to him, when we first see him, he's running the underground facility. He's clearly military because he's a soldier, like he says several times. He's a soldier to the point where, honestly, I forgot his name through most of the movie, and I just knew him as the colonel. He's the colonel.
Too.
He's a soldier. Yeah. That's how we know him. And you see him okay, so he's the head. He's the one abducting the children, and we're going to assume has nefarious plans for the children. And it turns out he doesn't. As you meet the character, as you go into the character, he's legitimately trying to keep the kids safe from the corrupt government and also keep them just alive in general.
I picture him as that guy who's a part of a program or whatever of any ridiculous, writing, whatever trope, where it's like, I'm in charge of it, man, but then I get this heart of gold and I take care of him, where realistically it's just some guy who's like, all right, I'm just going to keep this going. I'm going to keep them happy. I'm going to keep them safe. And at some point, I'm going to hit that year and I'm going to retire and it's all good.
Yeah.
Like, just doing all the right stuff until like I don't have to deal with it anymore.
And at least he never got to the Murtaugh phase where he was just 2 weeks from retirement, man.
Right. It was there. It would have been Akira,
shit.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, some colonels, try to protect children. Other colonels don an all-white uniform and start making some bitch and chicken. So,
which, by the way, on that note, I had no idea that's a legitimate Kentucky thing. Like there's like in the state of Kentucky, like
a colonel of chicken.
You didn't know the Kentucky colonels were a real thing?
No, I didn't think that was a thing for the longest time. I'm like, why is this guy in the military? And when was that a uniform? I just went with it because I like the chicken. So I didn't question it for the longest time. And then I actually found out, oh shit, that's a real thing.
Revelations.
Eye-opening episode.
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, so we've got, oh no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to mention that. I'm happy Josh brought this up because this relationship between, we'll just call him the colonel because that's easier. He really helped drive the last third of this movie, especially as they begin to explain what Akira actually was.
Yeah,
and I do know,
because we've gotten this far without actually saying what Akira is,
which is a decision that they made on purpose with the film, because Akira is a big part of the manga from what I understand. So for them to leave Akira almost completely out of the film until this point, that to me was why the colonel is such an important part of the film, because he pretty much lays out the whole scenario at the end, right? And it's that explanation that kind of helps bring Tetsu back a little bit, because he's going towards the edge of this cliff the entire like second half of the movie, and he almost completely falls off, right? So
I don't know. I think he falls off the cliff, to be honest. If you're looking at what happens, like he goes full on Dawson's Creek Trapper Keeper, and things have gotten really bad. And it's only until he's about to actually like he can't control what's going on anymore. He thinks he's going to die. Is he like, oh fuck, Kaneda, someone help me? So I think he's over the edge by the time he actually wants the colonel or anyone to help him.
See, this is why I'm disagreeing with you on this one. It's because someone deliberately meant to direct how his face looks in these moments, like the climax of the movie, right? His face has regret on it. Like his face is truly pained at the end, where we see plenty of movies where bad characters stay bad no matter what happens to them. He's at a point, at least at the end of this movie, where I thought maybe he did actually learn something. Kaneda doesn't learn a damn thing at all.
No.
But Tetsu, I feel like in those last moments of like the climax of the movie, once again, his face was directed by someone, Joe, to look that way in the animation. They didn't do it by accident.
No, I agree with you on that, but I think he was just scared, and it was out of fear and not being able to change anything that he cried out for help. So like he was basically like, I'm gonna fight you, and then he fought someone off a cliff, and as he was falling, he's like, oh crap, I'm gonna die too. Someone help me.
But he acts out of fear the entire movie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's why I think there's actually some growth in a villain here, because he acts out of being scared and afraid of his powers and truly not knowing who he is, and finally reaching a point at the end where he can ask for help, because he could have asked for help the entire time, like the entire time from being experimented on, knowing he's like this all-powerful being. He never asks for help until that point.
I think that's a good point to describe it as, a villain story, because the villain, bad guy, the bad entity, the whatever throughout the movie, you can either say it's in flux or there isn't one. There isn't the Joker to the Batman, or anything along those lines where it's a clear black and white. There's so many different varying levels of, whether it's Tetsuo, whether it's the Colonel, or those creepy ass little kids, or any of those things throughout the other biker gang.
Mhm.
There isn't some sort of, hey, us versus them, good versus bad. It brings in that aspect where it's like, it may be a fictional life, but it's still a life, and it's a
Yeah.
story of it. And so, I don't know, I guess I hadn't really thought of it before, towards that end, like you guys are saying, with, two different views on it. Like, I see there's a way that it could be construed as both. It's on what your interpretation, like what you read into the story throughout it, of which
Mhm.
direction that's going, of this downtrodden, watched over, micromanaged, beaten up, down on his luck, not in control kid throughout this whole thing? Or is it the, I got picked on, so I threw a trench coat on, style, evil nastiness, and doing everything in their power to punish people, type of direction?
Mhm.
So that's a good point. I like that.
Yeah, no, I like that idea too. Like again, like this is not like a hero story. Therefore, like again, like I don't think
Besides
um
the Colonel.
besides the Colonel, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think in that realm, when Katsuhiro said this isn't a hero piece, therefore there can't be a villain piece to it either. Because as much as like some people can say that like you put too much on society when people do bad things as the reason why they did bad things. Looking at like Tetsuo is like he is someone who basically feels like he's been bailed out his entire life by someone else and has felt inferior for so long that now he gets immense power and he acts on the power. And like every you could I hate to use the phrase, but every villain is the hero of their own story. But in this case, I don't think Tetsuo ever saw himself as a villain. It is now finally, I have the ability to do something, and I'm going to do something about it. And he makes poor choices because of it. So, which also makes it, again, when you get to the end, I don't know if I could say I agree that he acted out of fear the whole movie. He's definitely there, like in and out at points. But then there are also very much points where he feels completely in control of what he's doing. And he's acting out of like, I have power now, and now I can use it how I see fit.
So yeah, I thought the fear was there because of the control,
Hmm.
right? Whenever I mean, I'm not trying to get too psychological here, but whenever someone is doing something new, there's always a fear that you're not going to get it right because you've never done it before,
Hmm.
and that's why I think this kid is constantly living in fear. And when you mentioned this control factor, I see that as just overconfidence. There's overconfidence he's trying to portray to everybody now
Hmm.
because he's lived this life as a meek and underperforming person, and now this control is a facade for everyone to fear him because that's what he's always known. So I don't know. That's where I was living with it the whole time.
Hmm. And I think this again just shows kind of like the beauty of this movie is that you have so many layers that you can interpret differently from the person sitting next to you, and even from what Katsuhiro had in mind when he made it, is one of the reasons that makes this movie so great. And like we said, this all eventually comes to a confrontational head. And throughout the movie, we did get these little protests saying that Akira will come again, and Akira will have the time. And Akira finally does come at the end of this movie. Do not take that sexually. But I would prefer not to go over what Akira actually is, because if you haven't seen this movie yet, I think you owe it to yourself to figure out what Akira is as the movie goes on. And when you get that final big reveal at the end of the movie, it should not be ruined by a podcast.
No, I agree with you on that because if I had known
Mhm.
that going into it, then yeah, the last like 5-6 minutes of the movie would be completely irrelevant. So
Mhm.
yes, yes, I agree. What I'm actually kind of shocked by here is that with the amount of properties that I've always kind of had in my pop culture peripherals that I never truly focused on, did this one just kind of stay as a singular film, or has it gone beyond that? Because seriously, I have no frame of reference right now.
I don't think so. I don't think there's an
I,
Akira 2. I don't know where the manga ends up though.
yeah, I think if anything, it would be either more interpretation or something later on, that maybe weird studio permissions or something. But no, I think this really is just one of those standalone, simple, beyond simple, but just simple. This is the movie. These are the things that we did, and these are all the crazy things that came out of it. Whether it was advancement in animation or writing or distribution or anything like that. It's just kind of like there's Akira. That's it.
Yeah.
And this is like one of those things where I think the creators have made the right decision. We're like, you know what, this thing is incredible. It stood out for its time. It's a cultural icon, and I think they just leave it be. I don't think there's been any attempt to follow up with a sequel to this movie. There's no spin-off anime turning into a longer series. There's been several talks over making it into like a live action budget big budget Hollywood movie. And like I think I'm trying to think Jordan Peele was like one of the people approached to do it, and I think he said flat out no. He was not one of his favorite movies, but he would never try bringing it to real life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nowadays, like you kind of mentioned, there are properties that have come out since that I think to most it would be like what's referencing what at this point, right? Because it's been long enough that this has influenced so many other properties, it just kind of gets lost, I think, as opposed to having watched this and going, I know exactly who pulled things out of this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the Matrix exists without Akira, you know?
Yeah.
I don't even think there's some interpretations of what happens in like the Dread universe without Akira. You know, all of this kind of stuff just comes together here in 1988 and then kind of lays a groundwork for, the next like 25, 30 years of sci-fi. It's really kind of staggering.
Yeah.
Just looking back at it.
Which, and even then, it's not to say that this didn't borrow from things, because I know, Josh, I know you had mentioned that like it had even borrowed from like American references, because I know this was even like visually was influenced by Blade Runner, but I'm sure there are other things that it borrowed from.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of theft back in the day. No, but it is 100% a part of that era, if you will, that brought in, like you said, the sci-fi stuff, or whether it's futuristic, post-apocalyptic. It was, we've talked about that as humans. We've told those stories for a long time, but putting the imagery and animation and everything together with all of those different aspects or skills, or just all of the different ways that they put this thing together. It took all of the good stuff before it, and then all of its new things it shared with the other folk, over the next little bit. So that web of interconnectivity, if you want to make up a word with me, it's almost a center point. It's not the only one, but it is one of the biggest parts of that foundation.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like I've brought up on the show before, in America we call it plagiarism, but in France they call it homage. And like I would say that there is some homage from Akira that Akira does to other sci-fi movies, but there are so many other properties that pay homage to Akira, with taking things from the movie. Which, as we get to kind of like the closing point of this discussion, why do we think this movie does stand the test of time? Why do we still talk about it 34 years later? We did definitely go over the story and some of the groundbreaking animation and production work that went behind it. But you can have a visually good-looking movie that just sucks still. Like, yeah, it's pretty, but that's just a weird CGI bland fight at the end of the movie, and everything around it wasn't that great. So what about this movie makes it stand out? What makes it, just keep going?
I'll take a shot at this once again, just because I've only seen it once. For me as a moviegoer, I can appreciate films that build escalation, and they do it in a way that doesn't overwhelm you. Okay, because this movie introduces you to a lot of stuff you're familiar with, like we talked about, the political intrigue. We've got writing, we've got some violence with the street gangs, all this stuff. Okay, I've got this, I understand it. And so you are given breadcrumbs at a time. So if you're introduced, like you guys mentioned, you see a blue kid in the beginning, it's not like, next time on Dragon Ball Z, and then they give away the whole fucking episode. This is like, no. You see this blue kid, suddenly you're kind of back to the kids are in front of the police, right? And so you're guided through this in a really responsible way so that you don't have too much on your plate at one point, right? You never get full on too much bullshit. And by the end of the movie, this escalation and the payoff totally feels right for the pacing. And that's what most movies get wrong. Like, pacing is so shitty in a lot of Hollywood movies nowadays that you get way too much, like, just filler for the first like 90 minutes. And now where they spent the money. It's like, yep, this lasts like 14 minutes. Now there's like a CGI fuck fest. So for me, that's what I got out of this movie. It was responsibly paced, and it feels like they did spread out the budget evenly. But I don't know. That's one-time viewing. So I'll let you guys take the rest.
All right, Josh, what about you?
Three parts. Okay, one, nostalgia for me, and I think a lot of people that start within that era of anime, it's such a big hitter. Number two, for its pure accuracy. I remember 2019 like the back of my hand, and they got everything right. We had super fast motorcycles driven by electricity. There was a whole brand new Tokyo. We had superpowers, and people started changing different colors because we didn't care about it anymore. It was perfect, But realistically, I think it's because so much of it's so real in this fantasy world. Talking about that underground network, they always had smaller guns with them. They didn't have the best and the whatevers. They're sneaking around and doing what they could with what they got. And you can put yourself in that position. Like, I'm going to fight the power. I'm going to fight the secret society, or I'm going to free the children or whatever. It's just a bunch of ragtags. Save the whales. You're just a small group going against the big group, on the political side. Yep. It was ridiculous when they were fighting. I remember that in like the conference room or whatever, like the actual politicians fighting, that was funny, but it's like, pretty sure I saw that on the news not too long ago. Again, realistic, like the only thing that kind of goes beyond that is the story they're telling, which is, these psychic type kid powers or whatever, and some experimentation where it's like, all right, cool. This is why we're doing it animated, because that's a little messed up, and they're doing some crazy things with it. So, they do all that, and at the same time, they're treating the audience like an adult. They're, like you said, they aren't pandering to children because it's animated, and they're not making some sort of over politicized, message. It's just like, here's our story. We're going to tell it exactly how this story is, and however it fits with the people watching it. They didn't target it like the big Hollywood movies or anything like that. So it's that solid piece of delivery and realism in a super science fiction, fantasy, whatever type like genre or delivery. That's how it's packaged up. So
yeah, and I don't have too much new to add. I think both of those are exactly the reason why this movie like still is talked about to this day and is referenced so much, is because they make it seem like you can live in this bigger, larger than life Neo Tokyo, and they do that by taking timeless problems that will always be around human societies. You're always going to have political unrest. You're always going to have some sort of like idea that authority is overreaching here and there. And then they have like problems with youth, and where that we don't know how to deal with our youth. That sometimes we feel like the adults are out of touch. They're being too hard, and the youth act out as they do. These are all things that kind of just always happen, and that helps you ground a larger than life story. On top of that, they made it visually striking. They scored it very well. When you hear something, it sticks out and it sounds real. And I think that's part of the beauty of this movie. So at that point, I think we're gonna go ahead and call this one done. We've got my anime episode out for the season. Last time it was Gundam. This time is Akira. Next time it will be either Gundam again or just something big robot oriented. But we'd like to really thank our good buddy and friend, former roommate Josh, for making it on to this podcast. So we're gonna give Josh a time to shout out his blog one more time, and we're gonna give you the honor of saying the catchphrase to end the episode.
Great. Appreciate it, guys. Seriously, it was a whole bunch of fun. It was great. Just even friendly debates about such a timeless classic movie. And anime. Everybody seriously go watch a whole bunch of anime. If it ever gets published, and it's not already stolen, then again, if it is, go and check theirs out. But blog, sad but okay, SAHD but okay. Just in case, we'll throw it out. But other than that, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful night. And until next time, keep on dissecting.